Hey guys, this is Evan McCrow coming to you with another video about my life here in Japan. So, what is it like thinking in Japanese? It's kind of an interesting question. I do feel like my personality when I'm speaking in Japanese is very different because the way people communicate in Japan is very different than the way people typically communicate in English-speaking countries. Some examples of this. Typically, people try to keep their initial reactions about things more broad, more positive, and more just kind of like universally in line with the other people around them. Then they offer in some kind of like more specific, ideas, critiques, or just general opinions about it as the conversation goes on. I've noticed that this is like, this is very kind of vanilla, PC, really polite at the beginning, and then it can actually be more blunt than what you might actually hear somebody from the US say or Canada say or something, where, people will, they'll be like, for example, if I showed somebody one of my videos or something, they might be like, wow, that's amazing. That's really great. Oh, but your voice sounds kind of stupid, but it's amazing. Like I do feel like there's this kind of mix of, very polite speech, very polite mannerisms, but then like this kind of overly blunt attitude in Japanese, just in general, right? I know that some other YouTubers have made videos about like, what happens when you gain weight here. People will literally just, this is kind of an exception for the weight thing, I think, but people will literally just like poke you in the stomach, like the Pillsbury Doughboy, and say, "太ってない? 最近太ったね. You got fat recently." They'll just say it, which is just crazy. I can't ever imagine saying that to somebody just like when you see them. But this is really common. It's something that I thought was interesting was that I brought this up with some Japanese friends, and they're like, "We don't say that." But like I have seen it so many times. It's probably 10 different times where I've seen like some friend meeting somebody or something, and they're just like, "Oh,太ったね, you got fat." So, to me, that was one of the biggest culture shocks I experienced here. Was like, what the, it's like everything in Japan is about being polite, making sure that the way you're saying things is in the correct way. There's 20 different ways to say thank you and please, and there's different ways to say eating or drinking depending on how polite you want to be and how crazy you want to get with business level Japanese. But then you could just walk up to someone and say, like, "Hey, fatty, what's up?" Right? So, well, you can't walk up to them, but if you're friends with someone already and then you don't see them for a while, I think that's the thing. It's like some kind of trigger. It's like you're friends, but you haven't seen someone for a while. And to be honest, there's times where like I kind of don't want to meet people if it's been like 6 months. If I'm just like, I kind of I struggle with some depression, right? And sometimes I'm like feeling kind of down and I'm like, oh, geez, I haven't seen this Japanese friend for 6 months, like I know that the first 5 minutes when I meet them, it's going to be like some Japanese comedy, some manzai style thing here. Where like one guy is going to be like especially when I was living in Osaka and Kansai, everything was like this. They call it tsukomi in Japanese. But it's like, just kind of like digging into your friend, like giving your friend shit, right? Just about like something that doesn't really matter, just like as a way to like, like, hey, what's up, And I think that's kind of true that, in general, that there's a lot of that kind of like weird, observational kind of like digging into people here. Again, especially when I was in Kansai, they really have a culture of that there where things can feel like Abbott and Costello or something. It's like, oh, who's on first? Oh, and I'm just sitting there like, anyways, you guys do anything over the weekend? Like, can we talk about something? Hey, oh, Zinger, oh, But okay, so to get back to the topic, how does Japanese affect the way I think? Well, covered it a little bit, but I do feel like in general, things are like a lot more focused on the details here, culturally, but also as far as the language is concerned. I think that people will just kind of like focus in on the finer aspects of experiences. And I kind of think that's interesting, right? There's like a real minimalism aspect of things in Japan, but people also really notice the smaller things and they'll comment about the smaller things. So you can have interesting conversations with people. There's a lot of like niche stuff. People get super into their hobbies here. If somebody's into like music or something, they will be into music. I have a friend who goes out to he's seen like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of concerts, and that's just the way it is in Japan. It's like you're supposed to like meet everyone in the middle, but when you have a hobby, you go like all in on it and you're an otaku and you're like obsessed with it. And I think that kind of like carries into the way people have conversations here, where it's much more about like the smaller details and stuff. As far as like the first thing I notice when I'm speaking in Japanese, I do feel like, um, it's more of a back and forth. Conversations feel like much more of a back and forth, I think, in Japanese, where you like say like a little thing, someone comments on it, you say a little response, it becomes this really fast back and forth with like, again, this like little observational things. But the first thing that always pops into my mind is just like the mouth shape. I used to play trumpet, and they say in trumpet that you use your embouchure, which is like you create your little. I think that's what that is. You create this little pocket of air in your mouth, like curl your tongue up and to kind of talk like this a little bit more. I think that in general, the pronunciation in Japanese is more like that. Whereas like especially with like R's, where you would say like in English, you'd be like arigato. But at least in a Chicago ass accent, but in Japanese it'd be like arigato, arigato, and you kind of have this like pocket of air. And so that's kind of the first thing I feel whenever I'm like kind of making that switch to Japanese or whatever, is like I'm like making that physical switch in my mouth, and that kind of like prompts me to like make the rest of my personality changes as well. I think as far as like changes in the way people communicate, like additional changes, I think there's a lot more call and response in Japanese, where like, for example, there's like a set thing that people will say to each other, and like it's kind of just something that's like expected to be said. Like, when you meet people, or when somebody's going somewhere, like they'll say like "itakimasu," that means I'm going somewhere. When they're leaving the house, you see this in animes all the time, "itakimasu," and then the other people who are like saying goodbye to you will say "itterashai," right? And so that's just kind of like one of those things. That's one of those things that people just do here, right? One of the things is also like when you meet people, like as a way to say hello, you say "otsukaresama desu," which means like good job for your hard work. But like, yeah, "otsukaresama desu" is like one of the most usable things in Japanese. I think I probably will say that more than anything else here, because it's just like one of those like very, very common things where it's like somebody's doing something, "otsukaresama desu," or you get food, like another one of these sets, you get some food from somebody and it's like, "itadakimasu," like, oh, I'm receiving this food. And then when you're done eating, you say "gochitosama deshita." And people say that at restaurants too. So like every time somebody walks out, like at a ramen shop or whatever, they'll like shout to the staff, "Oh, gochitosama desu, gochitosama deshita." So this kind of like call and response, like this like set ways of doing things, is also one of the reasons why it's difficult to like move here as a foreigner, right? Because like people are expecting these kind of like call and response set, almost like manual like interactions to how to behave in certain situations. And when you're a foreigner and you can't understand Japanese, it like really puts a wrench in all that. But yeah, it does put you in this. There is a general feeling in Japanese. And I talked about this in one of my previous videos about kind of like the way like the anthropology and linguistics plays into the way people behave here. That an author, Ruth Benedict, who wrote this book called The Chrysanthemum and the Sword, which is kind of like it's kind of a controversial book because she wrote about Japanese culture, but she'd never been to Japan during World War II. But, I think that a lot of the things she wrote I personally think she was spot on with some of it, where like she made this comment about how people in Japan, whether they're working or whether they're taking time off, whether they're eating or spending time with each other, they do everything 200%. Whereas I think that like in the West, we tend to try to keep things a little bit more consistent. It feels a little bit more like, we can trust people a little bit more if they don't have these wild changes in personality, right? But, just in Japanese in general, you'll have these like really crazy, these ups and downs, and there's like this set dynamic to communication here, right? Where it's like, I'm eating, "itadakimasu," you go into itadakimasu mode and you eat really fast, right? And that's, you can like hold your bowl, hold your, plate and eat really fast, and that's totally acceptable here. but then, you say goshita desu when you leave the restaurant, but then it's the second you go to some other kind of dynamic within your life, you're supposed to be like, you're supposed to have restraint, you're supposed to, have perseverance, push through bad shit. That's what it means to be a good Japanese person. Push through that bad shit. Gaman suru, enjo suru. All of these kind of words, they just like play such a huge part in people's mentality here. And I totally play into that when I start speaking Japanese. And it's just like, you kind of have to. Like when you start speaking the language, you will start thinking like that too. So yeah, I think that that's one of the reasons why, like, learning Japanese, I do think that you need to come to Japan to like completely learn Japanese, because so many of these like kind of concepts are cultural and they're repetitious, right? And that you can see them play out in everyday life. And if you're just reading about it in a textbook, it's hard to internalize that feeling, that like kind of modal shift that you're supposed to do when you're in different situations in Japan. So yeah, anyways, a little bit of a meandering topic, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I really appreciate you watching to the end here. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great day or night wherever you are. And I forgot to do the YouTuber thing. If you would like to support me by subscribing to the channel or liking the video, I'd really appreciate it. And the biggest support of all would be to come back to the channel and leave me a real nice, wholesome, leave it to Beaver comment. Anyways, I hope you guys have a great, I said that already. I hope you guys have a great day, night. I'm too tired. It's late. See ya!